Algebra 2 class. Welcome back. Mr. Thomas here. I know it's been a while since I've done the cartwheel intro. I hope you enjoyed it. I may have injured my leg on that one, but I feel pretty good. So, anyways, let's get into it. We are working with rational exponents today. We've been learning about radical expressions and rational expressions. We're just going to continue it today. So, remember, if something is in blue, write it down, have it in your notebook. So it says, in general, in radical x equals x 1 over n. So notice the number inside that little v of the radical box is the lower part of the fraction when you remove the radical box. So an example of this right here, the square root of 36, remember there's like a little invisible 2 right there. If you were to remove the radical box and write it as a rational expression, you'd have 36 to the 1/2 exponent. Then the 3 right here, so that's going to be the bottom part of the fraction when you remove the radical box. And then over here, the 4 would be the bottom part here. So what is the simplified form of each expression? Well, you could take all these expressions out of the radical box and put them in fraction, or in this case, put the fraction form into a radical box and then simplify. But there's a much easier way. So working through this way, you're going to do like, 1, 2, 3 steps to get the answer, and you're trying to figure out if you did it right. The tip that I'm going to give you on this particular lesson is if you're dealing with all numbers, just use your calculator. So you should have a calculator. If you have one of these big fancy ones like we have at the school, this will work great. Any scientific calculator can work. But let's say you don't have any of those. Well, you can use Desmos, and we'll look at an example of that. So you could just type in 216 1 to the 3rd, and you would get 6. Same thing over here. On these expressions, you would just type it in as you see it. So let's look at an example. So once again, you could put this in the radical, and so the big number goes in there. The bottom number on the fraction goes right there. So I'm doing the square root of 64, which I know equals 8. But let's say I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted to type this into the calculator. So I'm going to have 5 to the 4th. Actually, we'll do this example first, and then we'll do the harder one. So I'm going to go to Desmos, and there's a scientific calculator they have. So they had 64, and then I'm going to write the exponent, and my exponent is a fraction, so I'm going to put a 1 and a 2, and my answer is 8. All right, pretty simple. Let's look at, I did want to look at this example. 5 to the 4th times 125 to the 4th, and so I'm going to hit clear all, so I have 5 to the 1/4, and then you can just press like the over button, and then I'm going to hit times 125 to the 1/4. All right, that looks just like the problem I had. An example, my answer would be 5. So use the calculator. Get familiar with how to use the calculator on many of the problems in the homework, the quiz, and then later on in the test. If you just use the calculator and you know how to use it, it's going to be easy. All right, so on this it says, if the nth root of a is a real number, m is an integer, and m over n is the lowest terms. So that's a lot of math jargon. So let's just talk about what that means. So the m and n in a rational expression. M is the top part of the fraction of the exponent, and N is the bottom part. And just like we looked at, the N goes inside that little v of the radical expression. The M is the number inside the box with that bigger number. So let's look at what this would look like in an example. So I have x 3 over 7. So if I wanted to write it in a radical form, I would take that bottom 7, put that in the v, and then the top number would go inside with that x. So the big number stays the same. You just got to make sure you place the fractions in the right sections. Same thing over here, except this time they give me the radical form, and then want me to put an exponential rational form. So I have radical a to the 5th, and so if I took it out, remember this is like an invisible 2, all right? If I took it out, I could just skip this step, and I recommend it. I know that this 2 is going to go on the bottom, the a stays the same, and then the 5 goes on top. Same thing over here, except this one, they trick us up a little bit because they have a 3 over here. Remember, they're inside on that B. Oh. There's like an invisible 1 right there. So when I take it out of the radical box, it's going to be B to the 1/5. And then to the 3rd. And so I would just multiply the 3 times the 1/5, which gives me 3/5. So my answer would be B with the 3/5 as the exponent. So some of this is using the calculator, some of it is just matching properly. All right, on this page, so on numbers 7 through 10 of the homework, you're going to have to use some of these skills and properties to solve. We're going to do a couple examples here on the board, but I do want to remind you, if you have all numbers, just use the calculator. Just type it in the Desmos calculator or the scientific calculator like I showed you. But you don't have to have these memorized, but just have them as a reference. So right here we have exponents. And we have 3 and a 2 here. And then we look and we see we have variables, so I'm not going to be able to type it into the calculator. So what I need to do is I want to put this in simplest form, so I'm going to have to put it in rational form. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to rewrite this as fractions. And I know that from my previous properties, if this is division, and since the x's are the same, I'm going to subtract these fractions away from each other. So this first one, I'll put in red. The 4 is going to go on the bottom part of the fraction, and then 3 is on top. Then I'm going to say minus 2 over 8. All right, now I cannot subtract these because they need the same number on the bottom. So the way I would do that is I would say, okay, in order to get an 8 here, I'm going to multiply by 2. And I got to multiply both of those by 2. So I'm going to rewrite this as x 6 over 8 minus 2 over 8. Just like that. And I know the smart board's kind of acting up, huh? But anyways, 6 8s minus 2 8s is 4 8s, and so my answer should be x over 4 8s. But they want me to put it in the simplest form, and so I can make that x equals 1/2, like that. Or another way, if we wanted to write it in radical form, we could say that right there. So either of those would be our answer. Now, on this example, what would you do? If you were here, you would tell me, calculator, use your calculator, Mr. Thomas. Use the calculator, just type this in, and you'll get the right answer, okay? If it's all numbers, use the calculator. Okay, this is an example that you may have an example like this on the homework that's this complex, but just reference those skills that we learned. So notice this one is negative 8x radical xy to the 2/3 exponent. So you have all these different features. What you're going to do is you're going to assign an exponent to each of these terms. Now the radical, that goes together. So negative 8 to 2/3, x to 2/3, xy, and they went ahead and they got rid of the radical, and then put the little fraction, and then put that to 2/3. And so what you're going to do is you're just going to kind of work your way through this and solve. And so -2, so on this one you could just like use your calculator on this first part right here. But they're gonna walk you through it step by step. So let's look at what they did step by step. So they tried to simplify this a little bit further, and they said, okay, -2 cubed, so -2 times -2 times -2 was -8. They wanted to get that exponent there. And then when they got that exponent there, they said, okay, 3 and the 2/3, when you add those together, or you multiply those together, it'd be like 3 times 2/3, which simplifies to -2 squared. That square remains. Over here on x to the 2/3, all right, that just drops down. There's nothing further we can do to simplify. So that one just drops. Then they went ahead and split the, by the way, on this one, so they needed to get these in the same terms, and they could add these together. And so what we're going to do, let me get my colors organized. So now, looking at the green, they just split these. So the x's went this way, the y's went that way with the 1/3. These all simplified as far as they could, but notice we have two x terms. I'll use a black. And so anytime you have two terms that match, you can combine like terms. And so x to the 2/3 times x to the 1/3, you add the exponents together, it becomes x to the 1, which would just be x. And so when I go through to simplify, my answer would be -2 squared is 4. This one simplified to just x, and then my y to the 1/3 remained here. And if I wanted to put it in a radical, I would just rewrite it like this. And so this is my answer. All right, some of this is tricky. I'd encourage you to kind of look at this example, use the view example on MathXL as well. And then if you have all numbers, just use your calculator. All right, that is it. There are 10 questions. Please, 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 I've said it like 20 times, use your calculator when you're able to. Let myself and Miss Colette know which questions from the homework you would like for us to make a video for. That may help you through it. But good luck, keep working hard. I will see you next time.